Hello and welcome to Punk Rock Academic, the podcast where the rebellious spirit of punk rock meets the halls of higher education. We dive into the stories of those who break the mold, challenge the status quo, and bring the DIY ethos to academia. I'm Alex Yore, and with me as always is Dallas McCulloch, your guide through the intersection of anarchy and academics. Get ready to meet the professors, scholars, and students who are as hardcore about their studies as they are about their music. Let's turn up the volume and tear down the walls of convention. This is Punk Rock Academic. All right, Punk Rock Academic, Episode 4, coming at ya. I know I say this every time, but this is another great episode. We have with us today Mark Petz, MPA. Mark is currently a teacher, grant writer, and nonprofit strategist in the Southwest Michigan area. He's had a long and diverse career in the nonprofit sector as a director, coordinator, and fundraiser, raising millions of dollars. Mark holds a BA in history from Alma College, a small liberal arts school in central Michigan. He earned his Master's of Public and Nonprofit Administration from Grand Valley State University, also in his home state of Michigan. Perhaps you know of Mark from his exploits with the legendary ska-punk band Mustard Plug. Mustard Plug have been staples of the ska scene since before the Clinton era, having played over 2,000 shows in 19 countries on 5 continents. Mark played saxophone with the band in the early days and lent his talents to the Evildoers Beware album. After many years away from the band, he accompanied them on their 2020 Australia tour and has been back on the roster ever since. Time for some laughs and some Michigan accents. Let's get into it.
All right, here we are, Punk Rock Academic, Episode 4. We're keeping this Michigan ska-punk shit alive by talking to a Mr. Mark Petz. Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Saturday morning, I got a bunch of work done yesterday, and it's raining, so I'm planning on binging X-Men 97.
Hell yeah. And you woke up 10 minutes ago?
A little bit, yeah.
And our meeting was half hour ago. Right on, it's all good. You earned it, buddy. Don't you worry about it.
Yeah. I was really responsible for the last couple of days, so I get to fuck off all I want.
Yeah, fucking right, dude. Sick. Well, this is a little bit different because the first 3 that we've done have been people I haven't actually known. And like, I've spent a lot of time living in a van with you. So, and I will be a lot over this fall. So, let's just start with the basics. So you are Mark Petz, and then what's the letters after your name for your degree?
MPA, Master Public Administration. Sometimes you can throw a little N in between the P and the A for nonprofit. Got
it. That's what threw me off. Because I knew there were some bonus letters you had besides standard, but that is an MPA of sorts. Yes, it is. Yeah. Cool. But we're going to start at the basics. So we'll talk. What's your introduction to music, just in general?
So I'm out here in a small town. I had 2 older brothers who were into Southern rock and outlaw country. It wasn't called outlaw country so much back then. Your ZZ Top, your
Molly Hatchet,
Marshall Tucker Band. Yeah. So I would say my musical awakening was in that environment in the house I grew up in with brothers who were listening to that stuff that I thought was pretty cool. And then we had album-oriented rock, iconic station out of Grand Rapids, WLAV, that played, a combination of prog and new wave and what's now called classic rock at the time. All the Steely Dan.
Hell yeah. Rock for days.
Yeah. So that was just that was just in the air around me. And then I took a leap forward as a sophomore in high school when my buddy Rick, who I'll talk about a little bit more, took me to see the Tubes live in Grand Rapids at Welsh Auditorium.
Where was Welsh Auditorium?
It's right down by the Amway.
Okay.
It's part of the DeVos place now. It's like an old basketball arena / concert hall.
What year do you think that was when you saw the Tubes?
81.
81? Yeah. Okay. So they've been pretty well, obviously White Punk's on Dope, and this was 1 in a Million Girls era, or not quite?
No, it was before that. It was Talk to You Later and Sushi Girl. Yeah. So kind of pop, power pop and new wave sounds going on there. And they were very theatrical, a lot of costume changes, which really appeals to me. I like a show, Alice Cooper, stuff like that.
Absolutely. So that was your first, real rock and roll show, just in general?
Yeah, first live concert.
So what was your introduction into more of like the kind of the DIY, kind of smaller punk rock scene?
I was at Alma College, and we were just down the road from Mount Pleasant, and I had somehow gotten into the Dead Milkmen with the Eat Your Paisley album.
Nice.
And got a chance to see them at the Foolery. And I was going to dig out I've got the ticket stub still. I want to say it was like a $5 show or something.
Hell yeah.
There was maybe 30 people there. We were all on a small floor with the band. And so that was my first very small mosh pit experience. But yeah, that was the first real punk.
And then when were you playing in shows? Were you playing in bands around this time? Like, I know you play saxophone, but did you play anything else in other bands at this time? Or
I was in a cover band at Alma College. So, we would have campus events, and we just were guys that loved rock and roll. So the drummer was one of my best friends, and he was like a fifth year senior, music major. And the guitar player was a local townie, Steve Olson, who has been employed for many years at Elderly Instruments in Lansing and has his own cone tone guitars. He's an absolute genius, and he was a genius on the axe even when we were going to school back then. And we did standard 80s party music set of cover songs in that band.
Right.
And I played sax, when I could. I did some vocals, played harmonica, played auxiliary percussion because we practiced in the actual college band room. So we had those coconut things and all the crap I could go grab off the shelf when I didn't know what else to do during a song.
Hell yeah.
But, we played the Cars and the Pretenders and David Bowie, Talking Heads, Van Halen, Peter Gabriel music, and then Beatles. And of course, the number one song you had to play was Taking Care of Business by BTO.
BTO TCB. It's classic. Well, so your time was, so that was sometime in the late 80s that you were doing that, or mid 80s?
It was early to mid 80s. So I was at Alma 1983 to 1987.
Mm-hmm.
Another key punk. I'm anticipating your question.
Yeah, what's up, dude?
Deeper into punk. So I was in a fraternity that was sort of the not your typical fraternity. It was somewhere in between the Revenge of the Nerds, Lambdas, and Animal House. So, nerds with bongs.
Alex, do you know anything about nerds with bongs by any chance?
Not in a fraternal sense, but yeah, it was more a loose association.
So we had some friends, and one of the members of the fraternity was a few years older than me. The guy that introduced me to Taoism, mind you, and was a bodybuilder. And he and a buddy had an apartment that was sort of kitty corner of our little fraternity house in Elma. And they had a pirate radio station. And for some reason, Elma's not a big market for radio, but it was just something they wanted to do. And I went over there one day, and they had the Minutemen, three-way tie for last. And that was like my punk rock epiphany, because I realized that punk wasn't just, formula type music. It had this really broad spectrum. Mm-hmm. So I fell in love with the Minutemen, and, right after graduation, went to a record store in Grand Rapids. I moved to Grand Rapids after Elma and picked up Double Nickels on the Dime. And then my record collection, morphed in all sorts of different directions, but I kept adding punk rock into the mix.
Yeah.
But I was not really immersed in punk as much. I had a cousin here that I grew up with on the farm. And when I came back from college, at some point, he and his friends had discovered the Ice Pick. And he had a lot of, the classic punk rock albums of the time. So it was kind of like this reverse education and music from him.
Yeah. It just for people that are not from Michigan and don't know the obscure scene. So Alma College, it's a small town, central Michigan, the Fighting Scots. It's a very small liberal arts school. and then moved back to Grand Rapids, being the second largest city. But the Ice Pick is a old school venue in Muskegon where like every punk and hardcore band had played at some point for like $6. So that was post college. You moved back to the city of Grand Rapids and started going to some of those shows and running more. And I know you're a big metal guy and you're a jazz guy and all sorts of other shit too.
Yeah. Throughout all that time, like in college, especially, I was going to metal shows primarily, like Iron Maiden, Motley Crue on the Shout at the Devil tour. Just, I probably saw Night Ranger open for 10 bands.
So you never went to go see Night Ranger, but you've seen Night Ranger a lot.
Oh, they're here again. Okay, all right.
I saw Night Ranger on 9/11/2001 at the Elgin County Fair. Strangely enough, that was my 9/11 memory.
Wow. I did go see them. I went specifically to the Ionia County Free Fair, which was like a really big fair in our part of Michigan, to specifically see them play. It was pretty amazing.
So once. All right, right on. So okay, so you're hitting these
T-shirts still.
That'd be badass. So when you're hitting these Ice Pick shows, and like we were also hanging around with Reptile House was in Grand Rapids at the time, and the Intersection was doing more kind of like the DIY punk scene.
Yeah, and I would say, in addition to the metal, I was firmly into the college rock genre, right? And I worked for the college radio station, so probably the poster children of that would be REM, bands that got played on college radio because certainly commercial radio wasn't going to play them. So that was sort of where I had a peripheral relationship with punk. I actually never went to the Ice Pick, sadly. I don't have that patch on my vest. But they were, that was the influence that I felt from people who knew that scene, right? Yeah. So, I guess beyond that, the experience when I was in Grand Rapids was definitely the heyday of the original Intersection, which was in an area called Easttown, which was sort of the eclectic alternative neighborhood where the cool people in Grand Rapids lived that weren't under the thrall of John Kelvin. And saw some cool bands there. That was my friend. I had a friend and a housemate at the time, Oscar Bittinger, who ended up helping us produce the Big Daddy Multitude Mustard Plug album. And Oscar is still around. He's a luminary of the folk rock scene in Grand Rapids and very DIY. He had a home recording studio in the basement of our house. He played a show that I had a band, or he had a band that I kind of jumped in on for a few songs called Pillar of Fire. And we played for one of his birthday parties at the Intersection. And the opening, or the main band that was going to play was Goober and the Peas. And their drummer was Jack White at the time.
Yeah, that's why I've seen that name for sure. Yeah.
And so they, it was Oscar's birthday. So we're like asking Jack, who was the spokesperson for the band before the set. It's like, hey, would you guys mind playing first? And then you can get on the road back to Detroit. And because it's Oscar's special day, and, we got all this great set that we really rehearsed, and he was cool with it. And so that's how Jack White opened for me.
Yeah, there we go. That's solid. So now in these days, obviously, because you joined Mustard Plug, what, 92 or 93?
92, yeah.
Okay, so
yeah.
They'd done a few shows around. Is that how you knew those guys, from hanging out around in Easttown, or?
When I had been in Grand Rapids, like the first 4 years that I lived in Grand Rapids, I was heavily into the blues scene because this was the era of Stevie Ray Vaughan and the Blues Brothers, and there was a lot of especially around the Midwest, Lake Michigan area, because Chicago was right across the lake, and we were on the circuit for a lot of these blues guys, from the 60s and 70s that were touring clubs in the Midwest. And I was really getting into that. A lot of the friends that I had in Grand Rapids at the time were these West Side Polish blues aficionados. And so we had a band, Harry Lucas and the Lowdown, for several years that, we were playing constantly. And that was where I was honing my chops. I didn't even have a tenor sax yet. I was just playing on an alto and playing a lot of blues harp, singing a lot of songs. And, there was a big Marlboro Tobacco Company music competition, Battle of the Bands in the area. And we went up against a lot of the local bands and ended up winning the West Michigan competition and won a trip to Nashville, which included a showcase and workshops with people in the music industry. And of course, that didn't really go anywhere for us. We were too busy partying and carrying on. It's like, why are we here? We're a blues band. And one of the local bands, this is another coincidence, one of the local bands that we outplayed them apparently in the competition was Johnny with an I, which was Brian Vander Ark's predecessor.
The Verve Pipe.
The Verve Pipe, yeah. And I always felt bad about that. But then, full circle, going around and playing the freshman with Mustard Plug all these years later. It's like small town, baby.
Yeah. So you're playing in that band, and then at some point, how did you wind up in joining Mustard Plug, who had done a few gigs at that point?
Yeah, so our band, the blues band, kind of folded for after the guitar player's wife was pregnant with her first child, and he was sort of the central talent of the band. So I took a break, and I had just failed in my first job out of college as a salesman for a printing company, and was working at Kinko's, which was for all you kids out there, that was like where you would take your copies to be made. And it's become or morphed into the FedEx stores and whatnot. But at the time, Kinko's was like, not everybody had a desktop computer or printers or color lasers and stuff. So these guys were coming in when I was working at Kinko's in Grand Rapids and doing flyers that were on the Astro Bright paper, and they had checkerboard patterns on them. So it was Dave and Colin doing flyers for their shows at the intersection or wherever they were playing. And I don't know, somehow chatting with them and like, hey, I know what this is. You guys are a ska band that has horns. And they go, yeah. I said, I play saxophone. I said, oh, we have a saxophone, but he's leaving to go to law school. I said, oh, my other band just folded. And next thing you know, I was practicing with Mustard Plug.
So what was your introduction to ska? Because I know you'd mentioned, being kind of the new wavy, kind of artsy punk sort of scene, but was there some overlap on that where you became familiar with ska? Because that couldn't have been that common in Newaygo, Michigan at that point.
No, but like one of the first 10 albums in my record buying career was English Beat, Special Beat Service.
Hell yeah.
And I don't know what age I was. I mean, I might have been a freshman in high school or whatever. And also, like, Past the Dutchie was really popular. MTV was coming out. So I was getting exposed to more of this modern British music beyond just some of the new wave stuff that, I was hot and cold on that genre in general, or the new romantic synth pop British music. But that band, to me, was really cool. The cover of that album is iconic, where they're on the tarmac walking out of the plane.
That's the one with Save It for Later on it, right? The second album?
Yep. And I Confess. And then, and then you go into the deeper tracks, and there's more Jamaican influence on it. That music, I guess from there, as an old comic book fan, it's like, oh, I just read a comic. That's cool. Who's this character? I must go back and find the backstories and back issues. Mm-hmm. So I got to know a little bit more about what the English Beat was about, as best one could do without having an internet and a Spotify account at the time. And, really just sort of fell into discovering ska music. The Clash was another one, but, by the time I was aware of the Clash, they were in combat rock mode. So I had missed the punk era and had to go back to discover that. But they had all those ska and Jamaican music elements in their music as well. So that was really kind of the origins of my knowledge of and appreciation of ska music. We also had a concert at Alma College that had like one of the touring reggae / ska bands of the early 80s. And I'm not sure, it might have been a Detroit band, and the name escapes me. But they came and played a show. Our keyboard player from my cover band and another buddy showed up with pork pie hats and suits because they were a little more hep to rude boy culture than I was.
Yeah.
So all these little bits and pieces fit together to create just enough information for me to kind of dig it. Plus, they had
Right.
saxophones in the genre, so I was in.
You got a job. So when you joined Mustard Plug, okay, so at that point, because originally it was like 9 dudes or something, and then were you on Ska-Pocalypse Now? Was that?
No, that they had recorded that before I joined, so
Okay.
I just had to learn those songs.
Right. And
Which,
then those songs were re-recorded for Big Daddy Multitude, which you were on.
Yep, a few of those were, yeah, and then plus stuff that we had worked up since then.
Right. And that was when you guys started like really touring pretty hard. I mean, before it was kind of a Michigan band, then you guys started like hitting the road for real.
Yep. Yeah, we did. I was on the first 2 official cross-nation tours of Mustard Plug. We went out west, did some big loops through the major markets, played with the Meteors, who were on tour in the States at the time, the British psychobilly band.
Yeah.
We had a lot of gigs that were questionable if they were going to happen or not. We had a few that were canceled.
Yeah.
My then girlfriend, now wife, had to wire me some money when we were stuck in San Francisco without any earnings because, I needed Taco Bell.
Even back then, Mustard Plug was eating Taco Bell every day?
Pretty sure we were. Yeah. What else were we going to afford? I mean, that was the 69-cent bean burrito days, man.
It's hot deals, man.
Or 49 cent? I don't know.
Yeah. So was it that second tour where you guys kind of got the break playing with the Descendants in California?
I was out of the van by the time they did that. Yeah. But we played with Skank and Pickle. We would have some team ups with some of the other bands. And then every once in a while we'll hear somebody from a more popular band say, "Oh yeah, I remember seeing you guys at whatever the club was."
Yeah.
My other band was a ska band, and we opened for you or something.
In 1993 for 12
1993 for 12
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
Totally.
And 69 cents per band member.
Yeah. And you guys, you were doing gigs with like Less Than Jake and like Buck-09 and Voodoo Glow Skulls, like those sort of other kind of earlier
bands. Yeah. Yeah, and I'd have to check the very helpful Mustard Plug show archive at www.mustardplug.com that will tell you the dates and who we played with in the clubs, even in those early days.
Solid Mustard Plug.
Well played.
All that history's on there. I still have my little day planner that have all the dates and who we played with from back then too, because I was in sales and you had to have a day planner, and that would include your touring information.
So what was the bachelor's degree that you had that kind of led to you because you went to Alma College, got a bachelor's in drinking beer and playing saxophone, but also got some credentials?
Yes, I had a bachelor's degree in history with a minor in English and an almost minor in psychology.
Gotcha.
And I went into Alma thinking I was going to be a lawyer and doing pre-law, but because of my disdain for the legal profession due to the amount of liability cases against fraternities over serving alcohol, I decided to go on the alcoholic side of that divide and completely sabotage my own career path.
Yeah.
So,
but it led you to working at Kinko's, where you got to play in a cool ska band and be able to tour with,
right?
Touring
when one
around.
door closes, a window opens, or whatever the hell it is. Yeah, it worked out.
Then it was 95 or something when you had quit to decide to go back to grad school.
Yep. There was the financial consideration. I was a couple years older than everybody else in the band, and I was dating somebody, so I had this perspective. It's like, this is cool and all, but what if I had a career for the first time? And the exact moment of the Dave Kirchgester will verify this. The exact moment that I quit the band is when we were driving this long haul back from out west, and we had this old custom van where the only place to lay down was in the very back. And it was like one of those little elevated bed seat areas. And you could never quite turn the speaker in the back of the van off all the way. So whatever the driver was listening to up front, you were also going to be hearing in the back.
Yes.
Context-wise, remember, there's no headphones. We don't have our cell phones and our own music. So you were at the mercy of the groupthink at this point, right? And it was like middle of the frickin' night, and Dave was driving, and I was trying to crash in the back, and I was completely exhausted from overdoing it for 2 weeks or whatever we'd been out on the road. And he was playing, it might have been Minor Threat?
Good sleeping music.
Or Fugazi or something. And I was just like, would you please turn the fucking music down? That was it. That was the end of my punk rock career at that moment. And then I went and I started, I was working in a physical therapy gym at the time. The main physical therapist, who was the head of the gym, was enrolled at Grand Valley State University in their public administration program with a medical administration emphasis in her area. So I started looking through the brochures and stuff that she had, and the nonprofit thing jumped out at me. I had tried working for the man and failed miserably in sales. I didn't much care for the feel of corporate America in West Michigan at the time, but I had a real heart for environmentalism and causes. So this nonprofit thing sort of called to me, and that's when I decided I'm going to quit the band and I'm going to enroll in this master's degree program at Grand Valley with an emphasis on nonprofit administration.
So then sometime after you had started that program, is that when Mustard Plug got signed to Hopeless and they were recording Evildoers Beware?
Yeah, and they went to Japan and they had more than one hotel room for the whole band. There was like, you guys had like 3 hotel rooms? What the
Yeah.
And they're playing huge festivals, and there's, ska music is on the radio, and I'm up, in the farm thinking, okay, well, I'll just have to ignore that for now.
But somewhere in this, though, because you recorded saxophone on Evildoers Beware, which is still the best-selling Mustard Plug album. Like, that's probably the quintessential album. Yeah,
because we, Beer Song, Mendoza, Box, and Dressed Up were all songs that had been written when I was still in the active lineup at the time. And I contributed, to the corporate, not corporate, but the collective writing of those songs.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of it was like those early Mustard Plug songs. Somebody would come in with the basic idea, Colin. A lot of times it would be Anthony Vilches, our original bass player. And it would just be like, hey, I came up with this. And then we would build an entire ska song on just that by just tossing it around in practice. And so those 4 songs had come out after we had put out Big Daddy Multitude. And I think there was early versions that we might have recorded as well before Evildoers. But anyway, they went beyond that. Obviously, created some really great songs for the rest of that album. But those 4 were in there. So especially having to retrack, the original saxophone tracking didn't work out, and they were out in the blasting room and said, "Well, I've got our old sax player. He might still want to play on this." I forget how that happened, but I went in and retracked the saxophone parts at a studio in Grand Rapids, and then those went out to the blasting room, were grafted into the mix. And so I am on that album, even though I didn't go out and meet Bill or Stefan and those guys. It was cool to be a part of it. Just
for the listeners, return to Bill Stevenson and Stefan from the fucking Descendants, that all of your former bandmates are now sleeping in hotels and they're best buds with the Descendants, and you're finding time to record tracks in Grand Rapids between hanging out working on a farm and going to grad school.
Yeah, or after grad school, I was starting my fundraising career in nonprofits. I was probably working for Boys and Girls, Campfire Boys and Girls, which was like a Girl Scout, Boy Scout holdover from the old days, doing after-school programming.
So you were playing just kind of regional bands, and then also working professionally in the with your, I guess, nonprofit and administrative. And I know you had a few different places you worked for 10 years here or 5 years there, sort of thing, right?
Yeah, I was. I got into nonprofit work because I wanted to help become a leader of the environmental movement in America, which was really struggling, but we were really starting to feel the effects of climate change. We were having some really hot summers in the late 80s. My dad instilled a love of the outdoors in me. So that's why I got into the nonprofit management space. And I ended up after 30 years, I've never worked for a nonprofit organization. The jobs that crossed my path that I fell into were not program and leadership so much. They were fundraising and fund development. So that was everything from special events to direct mail, major gifts, a lot of grant writing to foundations. And those were the jobs that I was doing primarily. And that's a tough field. The average tenure of a development director at a nonprofit is 2.5 years. So my resume is long and meandering from the past 30 years. And that was the struggle. I mean, it's not an easy job. And, I had a lot of success in it, but it's like a bucket with a hole in it. You can never quite fill up the resources that a nonprofit needs. Yeah. I kept in the music scene mostly by going back and playing with prior bands, members of the prior bands that I'd been in. So I would go out and jam with the blues band in whatever iteration they might have and play at the bowling alley in Lowell or Rockford rather, or, the occasional wedding reception. And then at some point with Mustard Plug, I started showing up to the holiday shows because Mustard Plug is an annual tradition of playing at the intersection in Grand Rapids, as well as Chicago and Detroit. So that was kind of how I kept up with it. Especially playing the songs that I knew from my tenure in the band, and then gradually learning songs that they had written after I was out.
I believe so. Where I first met you, because I've been working with Mustard Plug off and on for I guess almost 20 years now, or I guess known them in some professional capacity. But it was I think 2011. It was the 15-year anniversary of Evildoers Beware. If I remember correctly, you might have been just between jobs or something at that point, and they were like, "Hey,
call it what it is, Dallas. I was unemployed, and
whatever, dude. It sounds great." And they were like, "Hey, do you want to do these shows? We're playing this album front to back." And they're like, "Holy shit, Petz is going to do it!" And I remember being in the van, like, "Holy fuck, Petz is going to do it." He's like a grown ass man, It's he's
an off-worlder.
I know he's doing like real shit. So.
Yeah, so I think that was a big one. I think the 10-year anniversary show I remember distinctly as well.
Maybe that's what it was.
You got ceramic top beer there.
Yeah, I'm triple fisting. I'm in Germany, but yeah. So that was where some of those shows were pretty. I mean, they were awesome. And yeah, you would do the Chicago, Grand Rapids, like Cleveland, Detroit, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think also part of that career was, or part of those tours. I was on an extended unemployment stint there because the 2008 crash had happened and nobody was hiring. And, with a master's degree and a certain amount of experience, I was qualified for jobs, but there was not a lot of hiring happening in the nonprofit world at the levels that I needed. And mind you, I live an hour outside of Grand Rapids. So all the major markets, I've got to make it worthwhile if I'm going to drive to a job for an hour. But I kept looking and I had some time on my hands and I went out with Mustard Plug on a tour with Deals Gone Bad or a couple of little mini tours around that time. Got to know those guys. That was really my first kind of like, oh, this is what it's like. This is what I've been missing for the last 15, 20 years. And
this is what these guys started doing the week after I quit the band. Like you have catering and hotels and people are at your shows.
There's only one other member of the band in my queen bed at the hotel after the show. It was,
and a lot of time it's me. It's just a merch guy. I'm harmless. Yeah. So then sometime not too terribly long after that, it was so Brandon and Jim, I guess Brandon first though, but the other horn players in Mustard Plug had kids kind of later in life.
Yeah, I was ahead of them by several years on that one.
Right.
We have one son, he's graduated college this past year. So we got into the parenthood thing a few years before those guys were because they were extending their adolescence. Right. Being in a far rising band,
So you guys have done the same things, just in slightly different orders. But it seemed like that was you were like the auxiliary guy, where it was oh shit, Brandon's got a newborn. He can't do this run. Hey, Mark, will you come? Because we got two of you guys show up, and your kid's like not shitting on himself or puking all over anymore because he's like has a mustache or whatever. So it's
right. Yeah, like Legos and a mustache to keep him busy.
Yeah,
we. I was able to come in and fill in from time to time. And even those shows with Deals Gone Bad, I thought the band was really cool to let me in because that was all three of us. I wasn't a fill-in guy at that point, but it was a really good time, and that's how I got to meet Nate and Rick Johnson had joined as the new rhythm section at that point. I hadn't met those guys before on those runs, but definitely helping to ease the logistics of having one horn player that just couldn't go for whatever reason. But then the band could say yes to a gig because they could pull me in at a moment's notice. And that was how the pre-COVID Australia tour happened.
Tell me about you winding up in Australia, because that's a pretty good fill-in gig, it sounds like.
Yeah. Was that a good transit? Were you about to ask me that question?
I was getting there, bud.
Did we skip anything? Because I could go back if you want.
No, we're good. We're good, dude. Don't worry. We'll fix the shit in post. Don't worry.
So, again, played enough with the band. I know pretty well my way through the current set list, even though a lot of the songs were written after I left. And Dave gets a hold of me and says, "Hey, Mark, you want to go to Australia with Mustard Plug?" Kind of out of the blue.
Like, how far notice do you think?
Oh, I think it was far because you got to get all the visa stuff and all the bookings. Yeah. I bet it was at least 4 to 6 months.
And Jim was probably thinking, well, if my wife is 3 months pregnant, that means it'll probably be.
So that would have been the timing. The timing would have been, we're going to Australia, and Jim's wife's going to have another baby. And so somewhere in there, it's like Jim can't go to Australia because she was due at that time, or right around that time. So I get the call, and I love to travel, and it's like, hell yeah, I'll jump into this. Let's go to Australia. Little did I know, there wasn't a lot of downtime on that trip. It was awesome. But every town in Australia is a 12-hour drive. So that doesn't work if you're playing back-to-back shows and you're over 25 years old. So we had to fly a lot. And so it was pretty grueling. I mean, it was like show up, set up, play the show, go to your whatever kind of weird Australian hotel you're going to be at, and get 4 to 5 hours of sleep, get up in the morning, go to an airport, go through airport stuff. And oh, by the way, there's something, some sort of pandemic threat happening in China, which, when you're in Australia, China feels like it's just right over there. And so there's extra protocols to the airport experience at that point. And then, fly, land, get your shit, go, set up, do sound check, rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
And it was pretty crazy. It was a lot of fun, but man, I was sick most of the time. If I ever had COVID, and I've never had a verified COVID case, it might have been when we were in Australia and COVID had not spread across the globe yet, because there was a woman on the plane behind me coughing. Doesn't make it real easy to get by in 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night.
You're patient one.
Patient
Not patient zero, but patient one. Yeah.
And in the meantime, there's that part of you that's like, I'm in Australia, man. This is the best thing, and the people are great, and the music's fun, and I just wish I wish I was more up to it at the time. And it happened. We played some cool shows with the Resignators. It was their Punk Rock Nation package that they put together with non-Australian bands on the bill, and they do the tour of the several major markets over there.
That's awesome.
And that's and then I never left. They couldn't get rid of me. Mustard.
Yeah. Well, so COVID had obviously locked things down quite a bit, and then at that point you rejoined as a full member after however many years of absence.
25-ish, yeah.
Right. And then so the newest album, though, when did you guys start? Were you in the demoing process? Because that album dropped 2024? Was it this year? Last year. This year.
Last year.
Last year.
It came out last year. So obviously after the Australian tour, basically the world shut down. I think the band played a couple of like a Supernova or something in there, and I wasn't part of that. But that was the big switch, right? And so during COVID and Trump, we had fascism on the march. The planet is melting. Half the population might be wiped out soon because of a disease that nobody quite understands. I should join a ska band. I should go play ska-punk music and fulfill my calling in the universe. No, I don't know. Somehow that's sort of a shorthand version of what my thinking was. So I approached Dave and I said, Dave, that was great. My son's in college. I've got a ton more vacation time to use in my career at that point. I want to join the band if you'll have me. Also, your social media game is weak, and I will help you with this. so that was my proposition. Now, in the meantime, the band is working on new material. Right, we're all in lockdown. Colin, especially, and Dave are kicking out some new songs. Colin had plenty of free time to do a lot of the foundational work that was Where Did All My Friends Go? So when things started to open up again, we spent a year workshopping those songs. Jim Hofer, our trombone player, had come up with most of the horn lines at home as well on a keyboard and translated them into sheet music. So when the band started rehearsing again, basically for a year, at least 6 months prior to recording the album in early 2023, that was the focus of what we were doing. There weren't a lot of shows yet, and when there were, I was part of the lineup. Yeah,
and then when you did record, it was at Blasting Room with Bill Stevenson from The Descendants. So you finally got to meet him after he put out your shit in 1995 or whatever. You showed up.
Yeah,
20. Something.
28
years. Oh my God.
So those guys, they'd recorded a couple of other albums out there, right? And they and the Blasting Room, the growth trajectory of the Blasting Room as a great recording studio. I mean, Evildoers Beware was the first time the Blasting Room guys had ever recorded horns with Mustard Plug in the studio. But by then, they were working with other ska bands and, had really made a name for themselves for the amazing production work that they did. So then I watched Filmage. And mind you, I was not a Descendants guy. I knew everybody in Mustard Plug had Descendants tattoos, Descendants socks, Descendants hats, hoodies, stickers. Somehow that was a blind spot musically for me, even in my voracious appetite for music. But I always liked what I heard, and I had their compilation CD from back when I was originally in the band, so I knew enough of the music. Well, then I watched Filmage, which is this documentary about the Descendants and all, and it's a ton of interview with Bill Stevenson, all enough to I'm about Bill's age, go out there and be absolutely terrified of the man before I even met him. Because I recognized the genius and the intensity of this guy from those interviews.
And he was in Black Flag.
Yeah, Black Flag. So then he walks in to the recording studio. We're out there to get ready to do these tracks for 10 days. And I didn't know how to act. And he could tell. And the first thing he said to me is, it's okay, I won't bite. That was my introduction to Bill Stevenson. Yeah. And then just to be around him for the next 10 days while we were doing the tracking and the mastering, they were awesome. They were awesome. Bill was great to be around. Still intimidating, but then you find out the childlike wonder that's behind the intensity and interests that we shared. Bill's a big Neil Young fan, so we talked about Neil Young music. He would come into the studio during that process of recording the album later in the day. Like I should probably back up, because the Blasting Room, it's not just a recording studio. There's a space for the recording musicians if they need to stay overnight. There's like a little dormitory area. The whole thing is kind of this cinder block compound. And then there's a kitchen, And then you go down the hallways and there's several studios for recording and mastering and whatnot. And like get up in the morning and you could already hear Colin down the hall tracking guitar parts early in the morning. The horns, I mean, once a song had the drums and the bass and the guitar done was when the horns would get to work with it. And we would start doing our work at like 11 o'clock, maybe 10 o'clock, and be done by mid-afternoon. And then when the horns were done, then the vocals would be added into the songs later. And that's when Bill would typically come into the studio, was when it was vocal time, or to hear back what we had done with the instruments earlier in the day. And that was when it was time for the Bill show, and I was done tracking my horn stuff, so I could dork around or add in some backing vocals here and there, and just kind of watch how Bill worked with Colin and Dave and Brandon, especially when they were doing the vocal work. And Bill is a delight to hang around. And then, we'd be done tracking by 9 or 10 o'clock. And Bill, who never really used to drink much, but he was sitting down with us, and, we'd have some tequila drinks, and he would tell stories. And he would also have usually some sort of musical obsession of the day, some song he had heard in the day. And that would be the topic of conversation, like a Paul Westerberg song or something, or, Tijuana Brass song. And then we'd have to play it and listen to it. And then can you hear that? That's amazing.
So Mustard Plug, I feel, has gotten better and better over time. I mean, it was really, it was goofy, fun shit. But like when you guys play, you play the full, you play off of every album. Where a lot of times, if a band's been around for 30 years, people are like, play the shit off that first album and nothing else. And nobody gives a fuck about anything else. But like, genuinely, I think that the new album fucking slaps and people really like it. And you're playing probably 3 or 4 of those songs and quite a few songs off the previous 2 albums that were definitely after like the heyday of ska. And I mean, you're opening with something from Yellow No. 5. And it's like, it's awesome that it's just, I think, just keeps getting like tighter.
Yeah. I mean, there was definitely a conscious decision after, it coincided with me leaving the band after Big Daddy Multitude. Mm-hmm. And Big Daddy Multitude is very much like those eclectic potpourri Midwest ska bands. You got to have some funk, you got to have some grunge, you got to have some metal, you got to have some hip hop beats. Yeah. And then somewhere through it all is the ska, right? And it is the much derided version of ska. And then the skate punk tyranny took over the sound of third wave ska, if I may be so bold as to use that tired phrase. And that was really after I had left, and Mustard Plug had leaned into that, and they really drew on their inspiration from bands like the Descendants, and what was really ascendant at that time in popular music, which was, aggressive but poppy punk. And then you put some horns over the top of it very skillfully. And they just got tighter, more harmonies, and less goofiness. Like we didn't all need to be Skanking Pickle anymore. Right. Like I really wanted to be in Fishbone when I was in Mustard Plug, because I had seen them live and it was one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. But I couldn't be in Fishbone for a number of reasons. And Mustard Plug at that time were not the musicians that they are now, and they sure as hell weren't as good as Fishbone at the time. Right. So it's like I was seeing the writing on the wall. It's like, oh, the stuff I want to do, I don't think the band has the same capacity to do that. Yeah. So that was also in my calculus of when I got out of the band, along with real life practical stuff. But they certainly carried on and wrote stronger and stronger songs. And then there was sort of another bump, quantum leap, I think, when Rick Johnson joined on bass.
In Black and White is his first album.
In Black and White, and Nate came in on drums. Yeah. And so there was some even different energy there. And those songs really picked up more on that concentration on the punk and the tighter songwriting.
I feel that era too into the current stuff definitely draws way more from, I would say, like a lot of it, it's like that minor key, dark, like 2-tone ska. I think of like the Selector and the Specials, especially, I think of like Ghost Town or, fucking they get like almost that sort of feel to it, but even like the dancier songs, and on the new album as well, where it's like you're very much drawing from, let's say Too Much Too Young, where it's like that is a dark song, there's social like punk rock social commentary, even though that's a straight up ska song.
Yeah, it was. You look at one of the top tracks that Mustard Plug has, the song "You" off of Evildoers, which is just pure sing along, light chords, sweet harmonies, riding around on our tricycles.
Yeah.
That song stands out now in the set because there is a lot more of that darker stuff that we draw from, and even some of the when we're playing with just punk bands and there's no ska band on the bill, we have to play over the edge or stuff that's just a little bit harder. Yeah. And so those elements carried into the recording of the new album too, and it's a nice blend now. I think minor chords, major chords.
I dig that approach. So Alex here you did a few dates out riding with Mustard Plug on the East Coast run that you were not on recently. And what was first time seeing them in fucking forever? Or
yeah, it's been since I was in Michigan. So
it had been
20 years.
A minute. All right, what was your hot take besides the fact that the Detroit Lions played fucking great?
Oh, the band was super tight. They sounded great. Like it was an awesome show. The shows that I saw were the best shows of them that I have seen.
Right.
Wow.
And that was opening for the Slackers too, so it was like a pretty Free Coasters were on, and Stop the Presses.
The Presses, yeah,
phenomenal band.
I always miss our shows with Stop the Presses. They seem like lovely people, and I get to meet with them and tour with them. But
they are very kind.
I think they played one show with us in Grand Rapids when I was there, but So you, Alex, have noticed a tightening of the Mustard Plug experience as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Was there a gap in there? How many gap years since you had?
15 plus.
Wow.
More than 15, yeah. Because it was back when I lived in Michigan. I left in 2006,
so prior to In Black and White. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's pretty crazy. I was out of the band for 25 years or whatever, and peripheral, but still connected. And to come back and do what we do now, and to be part of the machine, just cranking out the miles and the music, is it strikes me and takes me by surprise how people react to the band now.
Yeah.
Like politely, instead of calling us old, they call us legendary.
That sounds better.
We've earned so much of that just by being in the game so long. And then, you stop and you think, okay, all these bands that have fallen away for whatever reason, it's not for everybody, but somehow this group of guys has been able to make it work all this time. Yeah. And, the Don Quixote of ska-punk, Dave Kirch-Gessner, keeping it on the road. Right. Logistically and with the booking, and Colin, being a driving force behind a lot of the musical ideas that keep us going. So yeah, legendary, awesome. I'm really curious about what the next chapter will be, because we're going to continue to be tight, and when we're playing, it's almost effortless now. I remember when I first came back to the band, especially on those Australian shows, I did not know all the horn parts. I know I was playing a lot of wrong notes. But, fake it till you make it. And, eventually, especially when we were practicing the stuff for the new album, personally, I felt like, okay, now I know now I belong up here. I am legendary.
So I think the real reason because really within Mustard Plug, I could have interviewed anybody, because everybody in your band went to college. Everybody graduated except for Brandon, but Brandon dropped out to go on tour to like Brazil and Japan and shit as a senior. So it's like we all have that connection. But I think why your story is neat is it's college, Mustard Plug, back to college, grown up shit, back to Mustard Plug. So it's not that often that you hear the story of like having that big of a gap and being like, you know what? Well, but I think it's cool that if you're like a 50-year-old, fucking 50-something-year-old dad who's like, fuck it, I'm going to go tour in a ska-punk band. That's what I used to do. This is my shit. I'm having, and you're balancing, you still got a house. You're still fucking paying bills. You're still doing other things too. But it's it's awesome that you can just do that in your 50s and just rejoin. And then, I mean, you guys are just, I don't know, going to lots of fucking cool places and putting out good albums and doing very cool tours. And I think that's kind of admirable that people need to do that shit. Because I think a lot of people think that you turn fucking 30 and your life's over and you can't do anything new. And the whole idea of this kind of, I mean, our podcast is on, Alex and I both went back to school in our 30s. Like, we'll be in our 40s by the time we're finished. But you can fucking do that. Like, it's not, you don't have to give up.
You'll never be finished, Dallas. You'll find another degree to pursue.
I know. And
there is no terminal degree.
And that's fucking fine, but I think that comes from these kind of DIY punk rock ethos, the idea of there's other cool shit out there that I'm capable of.
Yeah, that resonates with me. I really think that being true to yourself, that I think I've been true to myself in my pursuit of music. I've known that it's not always the practical path for me. The path that I didn't take, which would have been to stay in the band and maybe, learn how to play guitar so I could boss people around instead of just being a yes man with the horn in my hand.
Yes, Colin.
Yes, Colin. I shall play. I shall not play, more importantly. I think, I don't know what that would have been like, but it has been an interesting balance. My career in nonprofit world has been very satisfying, but it's also been very frustrating. Like I said, the fundraising game aspect of nonprofit work is thankless, endless, and can be really frustrating and exhausting. My wife was just telling me the other day, she said, you've never really had a job that you loved, in that space. And it's kind of true. There's been short spurts of like, this is a great situation, but it's not like you're pursuing your passion. So for me, that was the music. That was where I have to do the DIY thing is to be able to give to that type of project. And I think the timing was just great because Mustard Plug was, obviously the entree was this big tour of Australia, glamorous. Would I have ever gone to Australia otherwise in my life? Probably not. And then, go to sleep for 2 years or a year with COVID on the world, trapped at home with my dogs, thinking about, what does it all really mean? And what should I really be doing with my life? And having that gift of being able to think through, the next chapter of how I'm going to spend my time.
Yeah.
To getting into Mustard Plug as they're creating a new album, right? So that new music, tracking the new music, learning it, tracking it, getting to meet Bill Stevenson and the Blasting Room guys, and then going out and promoting, getting involved in the promotion work with Bad Time Records and Mike there, helping with the social media presence of Mustard Plug, and then being able to tour with the excitement of that new material. Mm-hmm. It was the perfect formula to get back into it. And to, create a different balance in life that involves career and creativity.
Would you say it balances punk rock and academia?
I think it's a perfect balance of being punk and academic.
There we go. Thank you, Mark.
Yes.
So we got 3 final questions. Alex, do you want to take this?
All right, I'm on it.
All right.
So first, as we wrap up here, what is a band that you would say is like criminally underrated that people should know about that maybe they don't?
I'm not going to go with the Tubes, right? When I went to see them live that first time, and then I just became obsessed with them, and they had 7 albums out on A&M Records or 6 albums prior to the Completion Backward Principle. And the Completion Backward Principle was a big 80s record where I grew up. Like, they had a huge market in West Michigan.
That's the one with 1 in a Million Girls?
No, that was the next one.
Got it.
So She's a Beauty.
She's a beauty.
And that was when they were kind of intertwined with Toto and creating this sort of corporate arena rock.
Yeah.
But then there's all this creative stuff that they did in the 70s. It's very arty and weird and funny and sarcastic as hell. and they had all of their theatrical aspects of it. And I wish more younger music fans now appreciated that band.
I know the Tubes because my mom said her introduction to punk rock was them playing. I've been punk longer than you.
I was a punk before you were a punk.
I was a punk before you were a punk.
You don't believe me? Just step outside and see me.
That's it, and yeah, that's good shit. That's a good answer. So their origins, I know, their bigger stuff was definitely more that, poppy kind of radio rock, but like their origins were fucking weird, artsy punk rock shit for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And it was very DIY. I mean, they had all these props and costumes on stage. They made it all. Like the drummer and the synthesizer player were art school students and great artists in their own right. And so they created and made and designed all this stuff to put on these crazy, weird shows. And then they were amazing musicians on top of that. Just incredible musicians. So, and the keyboard player, Vince Welnick, went on to join the Grateful Dead after the Tubes sort of broke up. So that was a pretty tragic path for him, but they were, not musically, no, not just musically. I think it didn't go well. Band chemistry, and he was kind of treated as like this outsider, and he tragically took his own life because the Dead, depending on who you talk to, didn't treat him very well. But all that sadness aside, the Tubes are underrated. If you're, if you're a young person listening to this, go get yourself a copy of The Completion Backward Principle, because the 80s are kind of a big thing right now. If you like keyboard sounds, give that album a listen. It's a perfect album.
Hell yeah.
Awesome. All right, next question. You're stuck on a desert island. You can bring an album. What album? We'll give you a few albums, and you got something to play it on. It's a cool island.
All right, I'm gonna go with the Double Nickels on the Dime, the Minutemen, because it's a double album, and it's got like 70 songs on it, and they're all amazing.
It's a good value.
So I'm gonna come out of the gate with a punk rock selection. Miles Davis, Kind of Blue.
You're a sax player, that makes sense.
Yeah, gotta have some mellow horn jams. I do have a desert island playlist, and can I tell you what's on it right now?
Yeah, fuck it, list it, dude. Yeah,
dude, he's prepared for this question. Damn.
Yeah,
nobody else has pulled out a playlist.
I'm not surprised, dude. Mark's a big fucking music nerd for sure.
Oh, I've got like 700 Spotify playlists. It's just obscene. All right, album order. Here we go. Minutemen, Pixies, Doolittle, Tim, Replacements.
It's a good option.
Dead Milkmen.
So basically,
Eat Your Paisley. Everything I listened to in college, right?
All of your so basically just every like cool Gen X uncle. It's just all of their top 10 albums. Of just exactly. Minutemen, fucking Meatmen, probably Butthole Surfers on there. I'm sure. Yeah.
Exile on Main Street, because I'm a rocker.
Stones.
Stones. Exile on Main Street. Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers. LAMF.
There we go.
Gotta have it. I was a punk before you were a punk. See.
There we go. You were.
All those things. Yeah, there's so many things on here. Lou Reed, New York. I love that album. I don't know. I'm going to need a bigger island, man.
That's good. That's pretty good. That's a good start. A bigger island to fit your albums. Yeah.
Can I get some Calyx shelves on this island?
Yeah, no shit, dude. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Oh, man. David Bowie. I have every David Bowie album. Can't live without
even the ones that aren't very good.
Oh, I don't have a couple of those. Yeah, I don't need the stuff from the Labyrinth or
yeah, all right.
Yeah, I can skip that.
You don't want to jump the magic jump? Damn. All right, final question. Dun dun dun. What's the last thing you listened to?
Pull this up. Hold on.
Oh, see, he's prepared once again.
Mark Petz is on it.
Oh man, this is such a dad answer.
Creed.
Jeff Beck.
Oh yeah.
Blue Wind.
There we go.
Dad answer.
Yeah, Jeff Beck, Blue Wind, off the Wired album. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm. What do you call it? When you go back in your maturity.
Regressing.
Okay, thank you. That's it. So I'm
approaching death.
I'm approaching death, so I'm regressing, and I have a playlist that is titled 97 WLAV FM, devil horn emoji, flame emoji, devil horn emoji.
All just gin blossoms and Goo Goo Dolls and
no, it's more like 70s and up to about 1984.
Oh, I was thinking.
Not 1997.
Yeah, I was thinking, okay, yeah. The radio station, 97.
Yeah. So it was all that album-oriented rock stuff. And it's the music that I could remember hearing when I was washing my car in high school out in the front yard. And I'd bring the speakers out. So I got this playlist. So I've got this regressive playlist that I've been playing a lot of lately. Like I do keep up with a lot of modern music. And Colin and I are constantly texting bands back and forth to each other. Like the last couple of years, it's been the shouty British alternative rock bands, right? They play these killer instrumental tracks behind them, and then it's just like the lead singer talking like this. I am a poet, and I know it.
Yeah.
And it's just the shout sing, and there's like a million bands like that out of England right now.
Like,
but they're all good.
Idols you're talking? Or?
Yeah, Idols, Yard Act, not real. Is it Real Estate? As a woman? I'm thinking a different one. But anyway, so Kyle and I keep up on the new music together. But this classic rock, if you want to call it that, playlist of mine. So we're driving to Grand Rapids yesterday, and we're chatting and grooving to the Jeff Beck music, and it's getting to be 5 o'clock. I said, we're going to have to play the Friday song because we're reliving WLAV in the 1980s. And WLAV used to play this song every Friday at 5 o'clock as people were getting out of work. They might play a work whistle, audio track, sound effect beforehand. And then it was Jonathan Edwards' shanty song. And the Friday song, I don't know how it got that nickname, but the shanty was, we're going to sit around the kitchen, put a good buzz on. And I felt the need to do that because I'm regressing to when I was in high school and life was simpler. And I can still, I can play it on
I did not expect that.
I did bring harmonicas out on our last run with the band because we have this recording that was found on YouTube of the very first version of Brain on Ska that has some kind of wacky harmonica part because one of the original members of Mustard Plug played harmonica. So we've threatened to recreate the OG version of that song on the road upcoming.
Right on. Well, that's fucking sick. That was weird. That's cool. I did not expect that, but that's going to be fucking rad to throw on. But sick. Well then, Mark, I think we're all square on this end, and I guess I will catch you in for we can stop rolling tape or whatever. But
yeah. Well, thanks for being here, Mark. Man, appreciate it.
Okay.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Punk Rock Academic. We hope you're as inspired as we are by the incredible stories from the punk rockers revolutionizing higher education. If you enjoyed today's show, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your fellow rebels. Stay tuned for more tales of academic anarchy and keep the DIY spirit alive. Until next time, keep rocking and never stop learning.